Hey everyone, Malika here. Today, we're revisiting a powerful episode from our archives, one that's just as relevant today as when we first aired it. Sit back, enjoy, and we'll see you again soon. Today, leaked video of a horrific crime and the turmoil it's causing in Israel.
The investigation into the leak is sidestepping the actual rape and other crimes that are happening in Israeli prisons like this one.
As this scandal becomes more about who leaked what and not about the abuse of Palestinian detainees, is justice for the victims even possible? I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take. Hi. As you're watching today's show, leave us a comment telling us what you think about the conversation and what stories you want us to do next. And if you're listening on a podcast app, leave us a review and perhaps a 5-star rating while you're there. It really helps other people discover the show. Thank you. In Israel, it's being called the Sde Teiman affair. Last year, 10 Israeli reservists were arrested for allegedly physically and sexually assaulting a Palestinian detainee at the Sde Teiman detention camp. After protesters and some right-wing politicians stormed the camp to forcibly free the defendants, footage of the attack was leaked to Israel's Channel 12 News.
It shows Israeli soldiers dragging and allegedly sexually abusing a Palestinian prisoner, hiding their actions behind riot shields.
But video evidence of the assault has not yet led to justice for the victim of abuse. Instead, a criminal investigation was launched into who leaked the video. Late last month, Major General Yifat Tomer-Yerushalmi, the person who investigated the original attack, resigned, admitting she released it.
Major General Yifat Tomer-Yerushalmi resigned, saying she took full responsibility for the leak. She's now being detained on suspicion of obstruction of justice and breach of trust.
Meanwhile, only 5 reservists went to trial and are currently awaiting a verdict. None were charged with rape. Last week, some of the accused reservists appeared outside the Supreme Court in Jerusalem. Hiding their faces with the black balaclavas, they demanded the dismissal of their trial.
Instead of a hug, we got accusations. Instead of thanks, we got silence. You did not let us respond. You did not let us explain. You put us on trial in front of cameras, as if you had already decided who was guilty. But know this, we will not be silent.
Al Jazeera correspondent Nida Ibrahim spoke to us last year right before the video was leaked, and she's back now to give us the latest. Just a note for today's episode, our conversation includes discussion of sexual assault. Nida, welcome back to The Take.
Thank you.
This scandal that we're going to talk about today has a lot of moving parts and ongoing investigations, but it all centers on this one place, Sde Teiman, an Israeli military base that after the October 7th attacks was turned into a detention camp. Set the scene for us. What should we know about Sde Teiman?
We should know that everyone who has been released from that detention center says horrific stories and testimonies about what they faced. We've been hearing stories of sexual assault, of intimidation, of torture. This has led the Israeli human rights organization of B'Tselem to release a report called Welcome to Hell, in reference to Sde Teiman and other Israeli detention and prison centers where Palestinians after the war have been subjected to horrendous practices by the Israeli forces. A lot of the detainees who've been arrested were held under what Israel calls the unlawful combatants law, which is illegal in the international law, which allows Israel to hold Palestinians with no rights whatsoever up to 45 days without anyone knowing where they are or what's happening with them or under what legal ground they're being held under. That situation and the intimidation and the practices from the Israeli right wing have kind of given the free hand to Israeli prison guards and Israeli prisons to intimidate, assault, attack, and really wreak havoc when it comes to Palestinians' lives inside that detention center.
Wow. Welcome to hell. Well, that says so much, especially given all of the other gruesome and horrific images we've seen since the October 7th attacks. So if this is being called hell, then you know that it's significant. So talk to us about what we know from the testimony of a doctor about what one Palestinian detainee faced, the one who's at the center of how this all started.
Yes, it started after a doctor came out on Israeli media saying he cannot stay silent about what he's seen. And it was after he has been in charge of a Palestinian detainee who was hospitalized after the Israeli prison guards and the soldiers have sexually assaulted him and raped him. A few days later, there comes a video that is widely shared on the Israeli channels as well as social media, showing the Israeli forces taking one person from the ground and covering him and basically shielding him with their shields so the cameras do not show what they're doing to him. And that's when we believe the sexual assault and the rape has happened.
Okay, so what can you tell us about the Major General at the center of the Israeli storm? Her name is Yifat Tomer-Yerushalmi. Who is she, and what is her role as military prosecutor?
Well, her role is supposedly to look into, investigate, probe, name it what you want, but to hold account the Israeli soldiers who've been accused by many human rights organizations as well as the International Criminal Court of conducting war violations that amount to sometimes war crimes. Instead, what does she do? She opens an investigation into one case in Sde Teiman. Allegedly, she says that she's doing that to show that her office, who has been accused by many of not doing enough to counter the Israeli violations, is indeed committed to law enforcement. So even in her own testimony, she says that the leak of the video, that the investigation itself is, all of that is being done to protect Israel's image and protect Israeli army's image as an army that was investigating war crimes. But indeed, there are so many incidents where the Israeli soldiers and their commanders have been accused, and we've seen the videos coming out of Gaza that have not been investigated whatsoever.
So she is now under arrest for fraud and breach of trust. And the circumstances around that arrest are really the stuff of fiction novels, but they're all real. Her arrest for leaking the video was pretty dramatic. She went missing for several hours. Her family was concerned for her safety. There was an attempted suicide. What can you tell us about what actually happened and what we know now?
Well, everything about the story sounds like it's coming from a movie theater, but the only alarming thing is that the victim is suffering in real time and in real life. What happened is that after the state's attorney general decided to investigate the army's chief prosecutor, saying that she was the one behind leaking the video, the Yerushalmi decided to resign. And then the next day she went missing, including 2 of her phones. The prosecutors or the police says that they found a message that could be interpreted as a suicide note, and the police believes that this is part of Yerushalmi trying to avoid her court case, to avoid responsibility, and to be able to hide her phone. Why? Because a few hours later, after the police launched an investigation, they've said that she's alive, she's well, she's contacted her family, but her phone was nowhere to be found, only for them to even specify a reward for anyone who's able to find her mobile phone. So they believe that there are evidence that there is something that is incriminating her in her report, and they believe that she staged all of that to kind of avoid accountability, because initially Yerushalmi denied having any responsibility in leaking the video before admitting to doing so before her resignation.
Oh, wow. So a staged suicide attempt. Did they ever find the phone?
The police says that someone came and said that they found a phone inside the sea, claiming that this is Yerushalmi's phone. But the police says that they found the phone with 50% battery life, which does not make sense for a phone that has not been active in the past few days. It's still unclear whether that phone is her phone or not, but for now we don't think it is. And Yerushalmi was released to house arrest as part of the charges being presented against her when it comes to fraud, misuse of power, and others. But all of them are linked to the leaking of the video and not to the incident itself.
What happens next in this investigation?
Well, she will continue being investigated. She's not the only one implicated in that case. There are other people that are being investigated under the investigation that was opened by the state's Attorney General, Gali Bahrav Mayara. Now, the Justice Minister, who's close to Netanyahu, is trying to sideline Gali Bahrav Mayara, the state's Attorney General, from being the person handling this investigation, saying that there's a cover-up that was dealt with in this case. Now, the state's Attorney General, is fighting back, says she is the right person to continue this investigation. All of that will happen while the Army's chief prosecutor, as well as other Army prosecutors in that department, will continue being held until the investigation concludes. But there's a general feeling in Israel that Yerushalmi is the scapegoat. She will be treated in a way that will teach any future politician and army official, and any official indeed, to think 10 times before leaking such videos to the media.
Okay, so Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called the leak a, quote, severe public relations attack, unquote.
The incident in Sde Teiman caused immense damage to the image of the State of Israel and the IDF, to our soldiers.
And again, this is about the leak and not the actual attack. And so I think in hearing this story, people might think that Yerushalmi is a brave whistleblower, or that might be how she's painted, exposing the crimes of the Israeli military. Is that the right framing here? Is that why people think she did it?
Well, it's clear that she's been intimidated by the Israeli right wing, as she could not investigate any and other cases. And even in this case, we've seen how the Israeli right wing have stormed the Israeli prisons, have, including members of the Knesset and members and ministers of the current ruling coalition, have raided the Sde Teiman detention center. They've also called what she's doing as a blood libel. Others went to more extreme positions of defending rape against Palestinians as a necessity and as needed revenge against Palestinians for what Hamas has done in October the 7th against Israelis. So we have to see her in light of all of that context of failing to investigate and probe other war crimes and war violations. So just to see her as a hero for presenting and starting an investigation in one case that involved a rape of a Palestinian, when we've seen notorious testimonies of so many other Palestinian prisoners and so many other Palestinians inside Gaza, it really tells you the real story. They try to focus on one case and show that they are a democratic entity when you have a whole system that has been wreaking havoc and has been bombarding, killing, abusing, and assaulting Palestinians, not just in the Gaza Strip, but also in the occupied West Bank as well.
More with Nida after the break. So, Nida, we risk losing focus of what's really important here, and that is the Palestinian man who was so viciously attacked. What do we know about him?
Well, we know that he's been released as part of the latest ceasefire deal that was based on the Trump 20-point plan. So we believe he's now in Gaza. He has been released, which is why some are saying that could complicate the trial of the 5 soldiers who have been indicted of that assault, of that sexual attack against him, because the victim himself is not there to testify about it. Of course, when we talk about these situations, we have to always remind ourselves how difficult it is for victims of rape and sexual abuse to be talking, especially when they don't believe that the legal establishment itself that they're speaking to is designed to bring them any justice. We don't know if he had intentions to talk, if he has intentions to talk about that, but indeed we've heard other testimonies of sexual abuse and no one was held accountable.
You know, according to the original indictment, he suffered traumatic wounds, including 7 broken ribs, a punctured lung, a tear in his rectum, and injuries all over his body. And he later required surgery for treatment. Do we know anything about his health? And if not, if one is released back to Gaza in the state that Gaza is, what hope is there for care for him?
There is only the reliance, Malika, on community care, on the stories that Palestinians have shown the world of how they are uniting with one another, how they have been under a colonial trauma, but they have been collectively trying to support one another in the little that they have. We were talking to a Palestinian psychiatrist who said it's impossible to find therapists enough to treat Palestinians from what has happened to them. There's actually no treatment for what has happened. But she says that the community itself can serve as healing for one another. When we talk about the stories, when we share the pain and injustice that happened with us. But yes, there are not nearly enough medical care, medical professionals, all of that. So you can imagine that someone who's undergone all of that assault will be going to a place where many others will have similar stories who cannot really provide him assistance and help in the traditional way. But again, we have to also remember that this is not new. I myself interviewed someone in the beginning of the war in the occupied West Bank who was detained for hours and who's also been sexually assaulted. And he was saying how the Israeli settlers, how the Israeli soldiers at the time tried to push a stick into his body and he was trying to defend himself with against armed soldiers and armed settlers. So this is not a unique story, not an isolated incident, unfortunately.
Right. And not even the first time we've heard of gang rapes and other abuses at this specific military camp. A UN commission said it found systemic abuse of Palestinians in detention. Now, the Israeli military denies those allegations, saying it was fully committed to international legal standards, but because, as you say, you have spoken to people who say they were raped by Israeli soldiers and had to fight off rape by Israeli soldiers, I wonder if there's ever any justice. Have you seen that happen?
I have not seen justice being achieved. I come from a place where we had lost our Al Jazeera journalist way before October the 7th. Shireen Abu Akleh was killed while she was reporting in Nida in 2022. And a recent documentary shows how the killer was not only known to the Israeli establishment, obviously, but also to the Americans. And there were so many efforts to kind of put a lid on that case. And this is one clear-cut example of how an Israeli soldier killed a journalist and got away with it. So you might imagine what has been happening since then and how Israel and Israeli soldiers felt emboldened by the lack of accountability, that they feel that they can continue carrying out these assaults. And again, you have right-wing ministers, you have politicians who are advocating for these soldiers, saying all of these soldiers are Israeli sons and daughters and no one should be touching them, no one should be investigating them. They had to leave their families and fight in a war. So if anything, they should be rewarded for it. So you have a rhetoric, you have a country that is already boasting about the abilities of its military and the fact that the ministers at the beginning of the war saying that they will wreak havoc, they will destroy Gaza, they will leave no water, no electricity, and they will fight them in every way they can, including cutting food. So you can imagine that there isn't a legal question in their minds about the morality of what they're doing to the Palestinians.
Well, finally, why do you think it is, based on your many years of covering this region, why is it that the crime at the heart of this scandal has been so seemingly overshadowed in Israel? Why is it that more of the commotion is about the leak and not the abuse?
Because in the Israeli mind, it doesn't matter how severe the crime is. What matters is that the image of Israel remains as a democratic, quote unquote, state that upholds the rule of law, and it does not attack and target Palestinians. This is what it boils down to. They want to protect the image. They don't want any challenge to their testimonies and to their idea of who they are as Israelis. And that's why the actual dilemma in Israel is not the actual abuse itself. Although there are some left-wing parties that talk about the failure of the chief army prosecutor, Yerushalmi, in investigating and advancing any investigations into the war violations in Gaza. But overall, when you look at the rhetoric in Israel, it's more about defending the army, preventing them from being prosecuted, and not leaking such videos that could harm Israel's image in the world.
Nida, thank you very much for walking us through this story. It is heartbreaking and it is difficult to hear, but thank you for reporting on it.
Thank you.